Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints Hour, the controversial euthanasia bill. A Philadelphia Anglican church may become the first to accept the Vatican invitation to join the fold. And University of Alberta students investigated over satirical posters. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. Bill C-384, the controversial euthanasia bill, introduced by Bloc Québécois' Francine Lalonde as a private member's bill, an explosion of debate nationwide. A Philadelphia Anglican church may become the first to accept the invitation from Pope Benedict to join the fold. The priest of that church is ecstatic, while some others see the Pope's invitation as opportunistic. University of Alberta students came close to being charged by campus security for distributing satirical posters criticizing the campus president for her comments about the need to, quote, advocate for white males. Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Neil McCarthy is Communications Director for the Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto. Stuart Parker is co-founder of the Toronto Democracy Initiative. He's also a lecturer at the University of Toronto. And joining us from our studio in Edmonton is Mark Pickup, a columnist and disability advocate. And you, the viewer, we also see you as a guest, so feel free to call in at any time with any of your comments about any one of the subject matters we're talking about today. Taking us to the first one. Now, this one has gained quite a bit of headlines. It has exploded into a national debate, as I mentioned, and the title that you see there is called Make Life the First Choice. Now, from that picture that you see there in the chair, that is Stephen Fletcher, an MP out west that also happens to be a quadriplegic. Now, he did an excellent job in this National Post article highlighting the points back and forth, and he did eventually say that he chooses to abstain from that vote. But we're at a critical point here, folks, because this euthanasia debate has gone on for quite some time now. Some people see it as a right to die with dignity. Others see it as, hey, this is a real slippery slope when we're dealing with human life and the issue of ethics. So the question that we're presenting to you, do you support such a bill for Canada? And I'm going to actually start on this one from our guest out in Edmonton, Mark Pickup, who is a well-known disability advocate. In fact, he's been cited in many articles through the years talking about this very issue of euthanasia. Mark, about this bill, what's your opinion here?
I find it very ironic that one day after we celebrated the heavy cost that many of our soldiers paid in the Second World War, that we're talking about this. One of the very things that the German regime in the 1930s and 40s did was put to death their chronically ill, their mentally ill. Euthanasia was actively promoted and practiced in Germany. And now here we have come full circle. We're going to be doing the same things. I just find it very ironic that one day after November 11th, we're talking of this.
Okay, now, just a second, 1 second here, Stuart. One thing, though, that Stephen Fletcher points out, and he's a quadriplegic, is that when you look at this debate, part of it has to do with the lack of care being received by those typically who we think of that perhaps would qualify as for euthanasia, that there just isn't the support, there isn't the palliative care in some cases that's necessary, and this is part of what's driving this whole process of mercy killing, if you want to put it that way. What's your response to that?
Absolutely. Where we find areas where there's good palliative care, there is a corresponding lack of requests for death.
Okay, Stuart?
I'm sorry, I think it's really important to clarify what is in Bill C-384 and what is not, because this bill bears no resemblance to the legislation enacted by the Nazi regime. The Nazi regime sought to kill people against their will and without their knowledge. So to suggest that legislation allowing someone to ask to exercise their free will with respect to the end of their life is equivalent to a system that wantonly murders people without their consent is the kind of thing that muddies the waters. It is not treating either side in this debate with the respect that should be accorded them by debating honestly and forthrightly about the complicated issue before us. To engage in this kind of hyperbole, saying that, oh, this is the same as the Nazis. This would be like me going on to debate an animal rights person and saying, well, it's a well-known fact the Nazis brought in anti-vivisection legislation. We can't support that. The Nazis did it. The reality is, this isn't even something the Nazis did. The Nazis were about opposing and pushing down people's free will. And I think that this bill is about the extension of a person's right to use their God-given will to make choices on their own behalf.
Anything you want to add to that, Mark?
Well, respectful or not, the net result is that disabled people end up dead. In fact, this bill talks about people who cannot make their decisions and how you would go about killing them. So it sounds very fine to talk about people making their autonomous choices. One wonders just how autonomous a choice is when they feel pressured or when they have no resources to work with.
Now, just as an extension to what both of you are saying here, when you read the article written by Stephen Fletcher, once again published in the National Post, highlighting some critical points in this whole debate about euthanasia, he makes it clear what his suffering was when he became a quadriplegic, that he was in torturous pain, that life was so horrendous at that point that he actually wanted to die until some of those supports became apparent. So based on that, it would come to be that you wonder, are people in that state of suffering, should they be given, is it humane to give them that so-called right to take their own lives? I think a lot of people can say, look, they're at a bad point, they want to die, but do they really want to die? That's the big question, because as Stephen Fletcher pointed out, he really didn't. It was that time of torture that he felt that he wanted to die.
Well,
yes?
I think Stephen's main point in that was there are many people in their lives when they're faced with challenges, whether they're physical, emotional, mental, talk about mental illness in our society and how we struggle to deal with that, where people feel that they want to end their life.
They're suicidal many times.
But he then goes on to say it's only for the grace of those around him who are able to care for him, to support him, that he was saying, okay, I want to move on and I want to continue to live. And when we look at the point of palliative care in our society, if we spent 1/100th of the amount of energy and time talking about palliative care and how we treat those who are most vulnerable and ill in these difficult state to support them than we did in saying let's just find a quick way to end their life, we could really come up with some tangible solutions, and that's really where we should be pouring our resources.
Okay.
And I think there's absolute agreement there. I think it's very much like other debates about life, where our first priority, no matter which side of the debate a person is on, if they're passionately engaged in this debate, it's because they care about people who are enduring extraordinary suffering. And I think that all of us want to advocate for systems that provide people not just with the physical support they need, but with the emotional support that they need to get through things like that. Because, of course, these things are a last resort. And Stephen Fletcher, terrible tragedy, fortunate man that things got better. I think it would be what we don't have in front of us is the testimony of someone who had that experience and for whom things continued to get worse every day until they died. And those testimonies and experiences are out there too. And what we need to do is treat people with respect and dignity and compassion. And sometimes it means saying, hold on a little longer. And sometimes it means respecting that they have been holding on long enough. And that's a call. No one is ever going to get it 100% right. And so what we have to ask is, how can we give people the most respect, the most care, and the most dignity?
Okay, Mark, from our Edmonton studio.
Who will make those decisions? Will it be an able-bodied person or will it be other disabled people? Who will make those decisions that you have gone far enough?
Well, Well, and I think what we're trying to say is there's the dignity and value of every human life. And we're in a shopping sort of center mentality where we want to be able to select this or that and have instantaneous access to saying, well, you know what, my care isn't what it should be, my life isn't as valued as it should be in my own opinion, and so I want to end it. And if we had the ability to do that, how many people in this world would no longer be with us? We need to value
But in
every
fact,
human life.
able-bodied people have the ability to do that all the time, don't they? Anybody who can physically end their life, who is suffering from a non-physical illness, has the right to do that right now. And so what we're proposing to do
Mark,
is
you're disagreeing
discriminate against
Yes.
those who
Mark, go
physically
ahead.
can't.
Mark, go ahead.
No, they don't have a right to kill themselves. When we decriminalized suicide in 1972, it wasn't because we gave it a ringing endorsement. We recognized that jailing people was an inappropriate response to suicide attempt. We did not give a right to assisted suicide or suicide, period. The fact that someone can do it does not mean, therefore, they have a right.
Okay.
So let's not talk about we have a right.
We could apply that principle to murder and say, you know, murder is illegal, but people have the right to kill other people. I mean, that doesn't make it right or proper.
No. That's clearly not the same situation from the point of view of ethics, statute, practicality. You name the metric. Those situations are not analogous. They're not the same. I think that what we want to do is give people the power to exercise their free will and access to the services that they need to support themselves and to be nurtured.
And a big question we need to address today,
agrees on
too,
that.
is if this does become legal, what position does it leave physicians in now and down the road? Let's go now to Beverly on line 5. Hello, Beverly. You're on the line.
Just my opinion is we really don't know enough about death. I think God has his agenda, and I think he knows what he's doing. And I know that there's suffering and there's pain, and we have some hard decisions to make. But I think that we should take all that into consideration. And I think it's easier than we really think it is. I don't think it's as hard as we think it is. I think that if we just kind of let go and let God take care of it, I think that's his will.
Beverly, thank you for your call. This is a major question we're dealing with here because if this euthanasia bill should pass, it will have implications for everybody. So we want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with the notion of euthanasia? We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. Hello again, welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about our first subject matter, and it's the bill, the private members bill that's being considered right now, and it's about euthanasia. The question is, you, a citizen, do you want to see that bill become law in Canada? Let us know how you feel. Now, I mentioned before the break that this could have ramifications down the road. For example, if it does become law, what about the rights of physicians? If it becomes totally legal, accepted among the mainstream, could this leave doctors in the position, perhaps, of not being able to exercise their own beliefs, ethics, religious, whatnot?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've heard already from doctors who hold strong positions of faith that feel that when they hear statements coming from the Quebec physicians that, you know, they're moving towards advocating aspects of euthanasia, that they're very nervous, and their oath is to uphold life, and that's how they see it, and this certainly would come under threat for them.
Yes, your position on this?
Well, I think that self-selection often solves these problems. When we went through this with abortion, many people imagined that there would be a lot more situations where doctors, either senior or junior people, performing procedures or administering those who did so, would be placed in these positions. But generally, what has happened is that people who feel uncomfortable doing something like that move to areas of medicine or areas departmentally within a hospital, or they find ways working with a team of physicians who have different beliefs and different skills that they aren't actually placed in that position. So I think it's a big hypothetical issue, and I have a lot of sympathy for physicians who have these concerns. And I think that's why we need flexible management in hospitals to make sure that we don't unnecessarily put physicians in that position, because, you know, with the shortage of physicians that we have, with the diversity of procedures that need to be performed, I think that there are enough physicians who feel passionately about the need to administer these kinds of procedures that there's not going to be some terrible shortage where people who can't bring themselves to do this will be forced into it.
What about the other concern about the aging population? Now, this was raised by a very well-known ethicist in Britain, Baroness Warnick. She created quite a few shockwaves when she came right out and said that physicians have the duty to euthanize patients with dementia, and that they have a duty to die. And she actually was brazen in coming out and saying that this had to do with money, with the cost in society. She didn't hide it. And this has, and you're looking horrified there, Stuart, because I realized that earlier on you expressed it as a concern from the point of view of the person that's suffering. But that is another angle to this, that this woman, a very well-respected woman in Britain at that, raised this issue of the monetary issue. The population in this country is getting older. This is going to have ramifications for them as well. And do any of you have concerns about this area? Mark, go ahead.
You know, it's interesting we talk about how physicians don't have to participate at a time when we're also talking about conscience legislation. That physicians that would feel obliged if they don't want to participate, that at least they have to refer. Some of them would see that as being part of the killing process. Being involved in the pro-life movement for the last 30 years, I can remember numerous occasions where people were advocating that doctors who do not refer for abortion or perform abortion should be disciplined. This is not that sort of liberal, we're going to all get along. This is a liberal, you're going to do it our way or it's the highway. Yes, it does. It will put physicians in a difficult position. It'll also put families in a difficult position. If we go for this legislation, there will be a push, particularly, as you say, with an aging population and healthcare costs mounting, to in fact euthanize sick members of your family, so that if my wife says I want to continue to care for my husband, she will then be subjected to the criticism of, hey, listen, you want to take care of him, that's fine, that's your business, but don't ask us to pay for it.
Yes,
We
exactly.
have a cheap option.
It could become a family debate, and taking the easy way out, or making that older person feel that they're a burden on their family, thus forcing them into a position where they feel they're doing the family a favor by dying with so-called dignity.
And that would be repugnant.
A
that would be
travesty.
disgusting.
Yes.
I mean, there's
And
no
that's-
question.
it's a reality.
There's no question. I mean, we are in a society where healthcare costs are continuing to rise, and my feeling is, so what? Healthcare costs are continuing to rise. We have so many privileges having universal healthcare in this society. If my taxes go up because healthcare costs are rising, then that is obviously a better way to go than some insane idea of non-consensual euthanasia, pressuring people to be euthanized. I mean, these are repugnant ideas, and the reason that, and not only are they repugnant ideas on their face, my grandmother was a member of the Goodbye Society in BC. My friend Jim, Darlene, these were people who were active in that society. And they would have two reactions to something like this. The first would be, what a disgusting thing to say. And the second reaction would be, this person isn't part of our movement because they're bringing our movement into disrepute. Because our movement is about dignity and giving people the power to exercise their rights, not taking that away from them.
But my concern is this euthanasia bill creates a potential for an enormous amount of victims, if you want to put it that way. Mark, you had something to say there before we go to the phone line?
Yeah, no, this bill talks about a person appearing to be lucid. They may not necessarily be lucid. And if they're not lucid, that you can still euthanize them. We're forgetting that part of the debate.
Okay, before we go to the phone lines, be patient now, because I'm going to get to you very shortly. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, my point was just the criteria that we're using for the quality of life keeps diminishing. And I mean, from the very moment of conception to natural death is what, as Christians, we believe life begins at the moment of conception and ends at natural death. But now we say, well, if someone has special needs, we want to be able to abort that child because that would be a burden on the parents to have to deal with. If someone is elderly and that the family would have to take care of them and maybe additional costs, whatever the case may be, well, maybe that's not convenient. What are we saying about our society when we are basically saying these are human lives that we are devaluing and pushing aside?
The sanctity of human life, we need to address that. But first, I'm going to go to you on the phone lines. Ivan on line 4. Hi, Ivan. You're on the line.
How's everybody?
Fine, thank you.
I don't advise anybody else to euthanize themselves, but it's my business. If I want to kill myself, it's my business. I'm 78 years young. I've lived a full life. People should envy the life that I've led. If I'm suffering with pain, I'm going to join the right to die. Nobody has any right to tell me if I should live or die. It's me.
But what about making it legal for somebody else to help you die? How do you feel about that, Ivan?
Nobody's going to help me. I make the decision.
Okay.
No.
Ivan, thanks for your call. Any response there?
I mean, again, my belief
Yes.
is that it's not our job to determine when life begins and life ends. We believe in a higher power, and
Yes.
for us to say, okay, it's not convenient for me to be here anymore, or I think I've lived a full life, I mean, who are we to know what contributions we could make beyond those difficult days we have?
I think part of the difference here is that, we're emphasizing different elements of our faith because I'm a lousy proponent of secular atheism here. I came to Christianity later in life because of the deep esteem in which free will is held, and the incredible stories of sacrifice by people who laid down their lives for these principles. And I mean, the way the Roman Catholic Church talks today, they'd have St. Boniface involuntarily committed because he's out there provoking these pagans to kill him, and he's endangering his life, which they believe he shouldn't be allowed to make people take away from him. I think that it's really important to recognize that there is a strong Christian tradition of people choosing when they come and go, and a strong Christian tradition of respecting people's free will and not standing in the way of that.
Sacrificing your life, though, do you make that comparison to the concept of euthanasia?
I think that if somebody chooses, just because people have different criteria for why they choose to lay down their life, it's not our business to judge that. That is a matter between that person and their creator. That is something that they figure out through their free will. We can advise them, but when they make a decision, I think we should respect it. And I think you should go through the hagiographies of 1,000
We
years
can't get
of
away from what
saints.
Stephen Fletcher was saying in this article, though, okay? Because I once asked a leader of the Right to Die Society, what does it constitute to be eligible, if you want to put it that way, for euthanasia? To be suffering for 6 months or more? And I asked him the question, what about if you're a depressed teenager, you're 18 years old, 19, and you want to die because you're depressed for 6 months and you feel, well, this is the end of the road here. Well, fine, that qualifies you to die. What value are we placing to life here?
Says, though. That's not what 384
yeah, but
says.
okay, is it properly defined? What does it mean? Who qualifies to have that right to die? Is it stipulated in this bill?
Are we always in the best position to make that decision
That's
ourselves?
the critical point.
And I think your point is saying it's all about choice and being able to make that decision. We're not always in the best position to make that choice. Could be a number of different factors going on.
Let's go to Deborah on line 3. Hi, Deborah. You're on the line.
Hi.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I have MS. My husband has just left me and said he doesn't want to be with somebody that's sick. I'm taking dry up pills right now. I'm in a wheelchair. I want to die when it comes time for me to die. I don't want to live. I don't want to live if I'm getting fed, if I'm...
Deborah, do you have supports around you?
No.
Wow, Deborah, we don't know who you are. We're not going to come visit you, but I'll appreciate if you leave your phone number with our call monitor. Please do that, because we'll see if we can connect you with an organization or somebody that could reach out to you and give you a call. Would you do that for us, Deborah? She's on hold. Okay, Deborah, I want to wish you all the best, and I sincerely mean that. And what you're saying there brings us back to what Stephen Fletcher was saying about lack of supports. Now, this breaks my heart. Stuart, it's obviously upsetting to you.
I'm sorry, I don't have the intelligence to say
terrible.
here. I just, yeah.
Mark, can you respond?
Yeah, listen, so much for choice. Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I also have MS. I'm triplegic. There was a time in my life when if I had not been surrounded by a wife and a family that loved and supported me, I would have chosen death. That is not free choice. That is despair of monumental proportions. The sort of despair when a woman like Debbie, whose husband has told her he doesn't want to be with this sort of situation. I've come across this numerous times with MS, where people are reduced to the lowest possible point. And according to the choice folks, hey, we should honor their decision to die. Whatever happened to raising people up?
Well, I don't
Apparently
think
that's not part of the choice mentality.
I don't think anyone here opposes getting services and compassion and better treatment to people who are in trouble.
People aren't getting it.
And so the solution is to both not provide the services and deprive people of choice?
No,
is that the solution? No, the solution is to get people the support they need so that if they don't have to make that choice, they don't.
Deborah, once again, I urge you, please leave your number with our call monitor. We'll try to hook you up with somebody. If you didn't do it, consider calling again and doing so. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Let's go now to you, Romeo, on line 5. Hi, Romeo. You're on the line.
What happened to thou shalt not kill? And I would like to give an example. Some years ago, a doctor in the hospital told us to take my father home. He will die at any time. He does not have long to live. Turned out he lived longer than the doctor.
Romeo, thanks for calling in and sharing that. Now, to make a long story short, this debate goes in a lot of directions, and many people address it from a religious point of view. Thou shalt not kill is in the Old Testament very clearly for people who do come from the Christian or Jewish origins. But what about ethics, the value of human life? And this is what troubles me here. We heard from a very, very moving caller, Deborah, here. And to be in that kind of a despair, physical, mental suffering, living with somebody who's basically telling you, just by seeing them, that your life is worth nothing, I'm tired of you, you're a burden. What does that do to a human being? I'm very concerned about what this bill, inherent in this bill, what it's doing for the value of human life, which is precious. People in this position may not feel precious, but they are. What is this bill stipulating here? Mark, you wanted to say something there.
Well, under this bill, she would be allowed to die. This is what I was talking about earlier. We allow people to be reduced to their lowest point when they don't even feel loved by anybody. And we would consider that a free choice. I don't consider that. It costs a great deal. It costs a person's humanity.
Okay. Mark, thank you.
The answer is not killing.
Yes, and Deborah, I was told that you left your number with us. I thank you so much for calling in, because I know that there are others watching that may be feeling the same way, and just having you call in and expressing that point of view goes a long way. Thank you so much. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to subject. Did you have something you wanted to say before subject matter number 2?
I was just going to say, the value of human life, I think that inherent in the human experience is free will. And when we don't recognize people's free will, we don't recognize them as fully human. I think one of the best ways to give people hope, to give people strength, and to give people courage is to say, just because you are disabled, you nevertheless have that fundamental humanity, that God-given choice.
All of us need to remember the value of every human life, and I think these calls and this discussion is a good reminder for all of us. I mean, we've moved down that slope to where society puts more value on our material possessions, our material wealth, accumulating the stuff, and less on the relationships that we have, and this is a stark reminder that those are
I'm
really
very
important.
uncomfortable. I understand what you're saying about choice, and I believe in the human free will, but that's a choice like that age-old cliche that people talk about, like asking a person, would you rather be shot or stabbed? I just don't know how much choice is really available there. When you see a person emotionally dying inside and they're physically in turmoil, are they really making a valid choice here? I mean, we even have laws in society that stipulate that a person is unable to make a choice if they're a danger to themselves or society, and although that's another subject matter altogether, it's still the recognition that a person mentally may not be in a condition to make an informed choice.
That's right, Christine, and that's one of the good things about this bill, is that it does not in any way limit those laws about duress, because for a good euthanasia bill to go through, you can't possibly in any way restrain those laws about duress, because without that you have, real problems.
And there are those that would argue if a person is at that despair where they want to die, they're suicidal, so maybe they're not at the point. They're at a point where they become in danger to themselves. I'm very uncomfortable with this whole notion of that moment of deep despair and what it means for that human being that's not getting support. It's a serious issue here, and you're having confidence in the bill because so far logistics have not been ironed out, so we don't know what's being signed here.
But we
6
do
months
know,
or
we do
more,
know
19 years old, depression.
No, but that's not A, that's not in the bill. B, the bill, it is very clear that if you pass this bill, laws concerning duress, mental competency, depression,
We'll hope so.
all of those things are still in effect. This bill abrogates not a single one of them.
Well, if it takes away all those, then what does it do? I mean, it's obviously doing something for the proponents of the bill, and moving this bill forward is moving down that slippery slope to say, okay, what's next?
Mark, do you have reservations about that slippery slope there?
Huge reservations. This bill, you could drive a hearse through it. It's got so many holes in it. You got to appear to be lucid. What does that mean? And if you're not lucid, they can still do it. You can do it to an 18-year-old. You can do it for mental illness. I've got huge reservations. Our liberal advocates are trying to downplay that. But I'm the guy at the pointy end of the needle.
Well, and
Great
enough
point.
people aren't informed on this. They haven't learned exactly what this does mean, and they need to get informed about it.
I'm
They
glad
need
you're
to talk
saying
to
this
their
because a lot of people are under the impression that euthanasia means, well, you want to be unhooked from life support machines, and that is not what euthanasia is. It's very different. And as promised, we're going to go on to topic number 2. Philadelphia Anglican Church could be first to join Catholics. Now, that invitation by the Vatican came out some weeks ago that those from the Anglican Church, right now there's a split in the worldwide communion based on the orthodoxy of the church. Now, some are saying that it's entirely rooted in the gay issue, in allowing women ordination, that sort of a thing, but really it's about the orthodoxy of that church. So it's very divided into the southern cone of the Americas, Africa, versus the northern, which is North America. So the Pope has issued that invitation that, hey, if you're an Anglican and you're Orthodox and you're without a home, we'll take you in. Some have said this is a great opportunity to go into the fold and have the Anglicanism still recognized, because according to what I've read so far, the liturgy of the Anglican Church will be continued. But at the same time, there are others saying that the Pope is being very opportunistic in giving out that invitation at a time like this, given the divisions in that church. So the question to you is, what side are you on? Right now, the Philadelphia Church, as outlined in this article, may be the first one to take that invitation, and the priest here is very excited about it. I'm going to start with you on this one, Neil.
Yeah. Oh, I think a lot of people like to critique the Catholic Church on just about every issue, so they say that the Pope is being opportunistic. That's the furthest thing from the truth. He's, in fact, responding to a request that has come from some in the Anglican community who've said, we'd like to join in communion with the Roman Catholic faith. How can we do this? It's not as if he went out seeking, to bring Anglicans into the fold who weren't happy. They've come to him and come to the church.
And that's a critical point to mention.
Oh, absolutely. And basically it's saying, since this request is taking place in many different places throughout the world, let's look at some uniform guidelines that we can, so that we can have some consistency across the board, so that it's not, and so it's really to try to build those interfaith relations, build on that ecumenical dialogue, and to try to bring people into communion. And that's really what it's all about. It's not, I mean...
A question, has the details been ironed out? Because according to a report that I saw, they're coming into the Catholic Church under something a bit different than regular Catholicism. For example, an Anglican priest will continue to be allowed to be married, apparently, or at least the bishops.
Yeah.
No, the bishops won't. The priests would.
They can't become bishops.
But another question has been raised too. How is this fair? Because they will be Catholics, after all, under the umbrella of Catholicism. But how is this fair to other Catholic priests that may have wanted to marry all these years, and they're not allowed to do it? Yet these newcomers that are coming into the fold, they're going to be allowed to do it.
Well, in the Catholic Church, we actually have married priests.
But they come in married?
In the Eastern Rite churches.
Okay.
So Eastern Rite churches like the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the Slovak Eparchy as well, which are in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church, they do have married clergy. And so this is...
it's a wing of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in that sense, it's trying to accommodate those who've gone through formation in the seminary, that sort of thing, but have made the decision that, you know what, I'd like to become a Roman Catholic. I mean, we have 800 priests in the Archdiocese of Toronto. We have one priest that is converted from the Anglican Church and is a married priest. So it's a very rare situation, rare occurrence, but it does happen in different places throughout the world.
Okay, now that explains a lot. Go ahead, Stuart.
I think this is, as an Anglican who strongly backs same-sex unions and the like, I see this as good news for everybody. It's good news for the Anglican communion because to continue to be a split communion is not viable. It is creating a contentless and paralyzed church. So, if more conservative Anglicans decide that to go for greener pastures elsewhere, this is, as far as I'm concerned, good news for the long-term health of the Anglican Church. If the Anglican Church needs to make a decision, and I'm pleased that it looks that the more this happens, the more it leans toward making the decision that my faith community thinks is right. But I also think that it's good because it diversifies the Roman Catholic Church. That, you know, this is a church that on and off has had a hard line against married clergy. That line is softening here, and that's good news as well. Diversity. The Roman Catholic Church used to be a very diverse entity. It has gone through periods of intense centralization and greater uniformity. If that softens, that's also good news for the Roman Catholic Church. So I see both churches in this situation benefiting, and so
nothing opportunistic.
I have.
You don't see that.
You know, these churches are run by humans, not by God. I expect opportunism, and sometimes the grace of God manifests through opportunism. And because that's, that's what an amazing world we live in.
A difference between
so
sinful opportunism and wise opportunism?
I think that whatever people's motives, if the outcomes are good,
but the end does not justify the means, and that's not the case here.
Anybody who has read or learned a little bit about Pope Benedict would see that he's the last person that would try to...
And it's very important what you're saying there, because for people who don't know about him, he was once the prefect for the doctrine of the faith.
And he's
very orthodox.
He's been one that many have accused of
Cardinal
saying
Ratzinger.
A smaller church is a stronger church that's more faithful.
That's
so,
right.
I mean, if anything, he would be the last person that people would look
Great point. Mark, your notion on this?
As a Roman Catholic, I would welcome conservative Anglicans coming in, the traditional Anglican communion, and let the liberal Anglican Church go the way of the dinosaur.
Do you think that's a loaded statement? Do you think it's going the way of the dinosaur, Stuart?
Well, I don't know. Dinosaurs had a pretty good run. 100 million years of running the planet. You know, that's not a terrible thing. But
they came to a pretty sad demise.
Everything comes to a pretty sad demise in the end. I think
we're all
that,
positive here today.
You know, I think that. I think that the Anglican Church is facing real trouble right now. But I think that ultimately, whether the communion lives or dies, what matters is that it advocate for the people and issues that it needs to. And I think advocating for the dignity of same-sex unions, not just in North America, where that's getting easier, but on the front lines in places like Nigeria, in South Africa, I think that in Kenya, I think the more North American Anglicans can lend support to and guidance to Anglican churches in the rest of the world for offering compassion and leadership on these issues, if our denomination dies out doing that, then I think we've died out doing
Natural
a good
selection.
thing.
From that point of view, natural selection. These are all very controversial terms, I realize that. But on the notion of transubstantiation, though, is there a difference with how the Anglicans see it? I mean, the Catholics see it as the host becomes the actual body of Christ. Do Anglicans believe that, Stuart?
No,
I don't think so.
My understanding is that it's
so
a
is this going to
symbol.
is this going to become a bit of an issue?
No, I mean, according to the guidelines that I have seen that just came out earlier this week, so I haven't gone through them extensively, but
Yes.
those entire communities that would want to join in with the Roman Catholic faith would need to go through catechism classes, similar to what any non-Catholic would if they wanted to become a Catholic. So it's not as if you'd have two separate liturgies that would be identified as one, but actually the one liturgy that would be the Roman Catholic liturgy if they were to enter the Roman Catholic faith.
Okay, and we're going to have to go for a break now. Now, we're actually going to get to our third story today. Quite loaded, yeah. Stuart's looking a bit shocked there that we're actually getting to story number 3 today, but quite loaded because the University of Alberta president, now, understand that enrollment among males overall has been lower. So she has expressed that males need to be more represented in the marketplace this way, but that's not what she said. She said there's a need to advocate for white males. So because of this, students went ahead and they started putting posters up, satirical posters. Campus security threatened them with a charge. So at first they were told they were going to be charged. Well, the scandal has exploded and now they're being told that they won't be charged. But we're going to be talking about it after the break. Don't go away.